Hey, I'm sure people will continue to join, but welcome everybody um, to our webinar on all things artificial intelligence. This conversation was actually meant to happen late last month, but someone told us to break a leg, and Saul took it super, super literally and went and broke a limb on the mountains. Um, but well, no, I'm kidding. It was like painful, I'm sure, and a painful recovery, and we're really happy he's back. Um, but we're back on track now and ready to talk about what we're working on in terms of AI, what's new in that space, and also what people sometimes get wrong because it's something people are speaking about constantly on TikTok, and then to better degrees elsewhere. Um, but yeah, so and we've got a great panel. I'll introduce them in a second. But first, let me just say who I am so you guys have some context for who is speaking at you. My name is Mariam. I've spent the last 3 years working for fintechs. Before that, I made really, really nice coffees with like art in them and stuff. But yeah, for a while I've been working on product. Initially B2C products. I actually got to know Afan working on a financial services app that he launched in Pakistan. Um, and more recently, I've been at Idenfo and looking at how the really important world of reg tech can be softened into something that people like using, that feels intuitive and interesting, and so on. And my co-panelists are fantastic at answering questions like that in their work. Um, and so, yeah, leading the charge, there's Solomon Worsop, who is our innovation specialist. So he really lives, when people say the cutting edge, in my mind, that's where Sol hangs out. He did the kind of degree that would cause nervous breakdowns in many of us, and certainly in me, and now like brings together a love of data science with a ton of knowledge on AI, to see sort of how we can incorporate these new solutions into Idenfo's flows. And Afan Aslam has designed a ton of Idenfo's tech architecture, and founded a fintech himself. Like I said, that's how I got to know him. And yeah, he likes leveraging tools to make cool products, to solve problems, to fill gaps. He wears a lot of hats, is something that we keep saying about Afan. But all of which is to say, the panel is stacked, and I'm looking forward to handing things over to them. And I will in a second. Just a little bit of housekeeping before. I know that you are listening to us and looking at our faces. If you do have something to add, we prefer you not unmute yourself, but send things into the chat. Any questions you have, feel free to drop them now. There'll be a question and answer at the end, or you can drop them later on for that portion. And I'll try to get to all of them, but if not, I'll share an email to which you can send any questions we don't get to. Structurally, we're going to start with Saul going through a bit of an explanation of how we incorporate ML and AI into things that Idenfo does. Um, we're then going to talk about, yeah, things people get wrong sometimes in talking about AI, as well as talking a bit about Idenfo's philosophy with AI. Then the speakers will share things that are exciting them in that space, things we should all keep in mind. Um, and then, yeah, we'll get to your questions. These guys are really, really good at finding the balance between the human and the high tech. And so their insights are really for everybody, whether you are joining with an engineering background, whether you're an executive, whether you're a fresh grad or a financier. Um, and that access, to address what's on the screen is really at the heart of Idenfo's mission with all of this, to use responsibly and thoughtfully the tool of AI to create access, to create speed, and to create safety fundamentally. So, ramble over. I will now hand over to Saul to kick us off, and then the conversation will get going. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Mariam. Um, so yeah, I think digital onboarding really is a sort of key part of achieving Idenfo's goals. In countries like the UK, it's really about convenience and efficiency, both on the user side and for businesses. Digital onboarding lets us take a document from a customer's point of view that they just take a picture of their ID card and then a selfie and sort of they just get a green tick, hopefully, and everything moves on really quickly. From the back end side, the business can extract all of the information that's on the card, Instead of the user having to have filled out a form manually, it just gets pulled off with OCR. And it sort of gives an assurance of validation, hopefully, that that is a genuine document to a level that can't really be matched remotely without some AI in the system. Um, that's really a key part because if you don't do digital onboarding properly, it can really lower the barrier of entry for fraud. We've all heard a lot about deep fakes and face swapping and stuff these days, and it really is very easy, unfortunately, to take a picture of a document and put a fake face onto it or digitally alter the text. Or on the other side, if you've got a stolen document, what a fraudster can do is actually deep fake a video of themselves with the face from the document onto it. And obviously we don't want to allow that. So sort of the key two things that we need to do in digital onboarding is first to verify that the documents are actually physically present. They're not being shown via a screen or they've been sort of injected into the app somehow. And then we need to check that it's a real document. It's not a copy. It's not been modified in any way. And then we need to do the same thing for the person, checking that they're actually there and then validating that their identity properly matches the document. So to try and achieve that, one of the things that we do is we really try and focus in on the holographic features of the documents. These are sort of one of the first things that someone would look at in person. If you're having your ID checked or your passport, often you'll see someone shining a little torch on it or wiggling it back and forth. And what they're looking at are these holographic features. They're really important because there's actually a really high barrier of entry to copying them. You need some sort of specialized equipment, and they're always sort of subtly updating them to make sure that there's a gap basically between the time that fraudsters have to study and replicate them and what the regulatory authorities are doing. So to try and check that the holograms are there and valid, we use various different image analysis models. Technically speaking, they're convolutional neural networks, and they're doing image classification. Basically, they're looking at the card's appearance, checking that it looks at it as it should, that it hasn't sort of had the text altered in any way, and then also doing some more advanced analysis where we look at how the card reacts to its environment, and in particular changes in lighting. This lets us look at those holograms and classify a card as either a genuine card, a card that's being shown via a screen, or a physical fake. Uh, these models, they kind of use quite abstract features. It's not really easy to visualize, but what we've got on the screen is a representation of sort of what you could imagine the model is looking at. You can see this is an Emirates ID card. You can see that over the portrait, there are some raised areas which show as white bumps. We've got a hologram which overlaps with a lot of the text and the photo, meaning that you can't just stick something over them. And there's also a ghost portrait on the right-hand side, which has got another copy of the face, which of course needs to match the main portrait and the person themselves. So these models in digital onboarding are a really nice example of AI sort of enabling something that's really beneficial and just isn't really possible without it. The only alternative is to actually get that document there in person. Another less obvious example is actually facial comparison. So this is something that humans are obviously quite well suited to. We're all very good at recognizing people that we know, but actually, when faced with sort of unknown people, we're not really anywhere near as good as it as we might like to think. So people often really struggle to match faces when there's a large age gap. Of course, the ID documents, they can be up to 10 years old in most countries. And if you think of trying to match a small black and white blurry picture of someone when they're 18 against a 28-year-old man who's maybe grown a beard and now wears glasses, that can be really quite difficult. As well as that, sort of unfortunately, it's an unfortunate truth that there is a very well documented cross-race effect. So people are a lot worse. It's been shown in a lot of studies at recognizing faces, doing both positive matches and negative matches when the individuals are from a race different to their own. And this is a particular problem at border checks, where you've got people from all around the world coming in and out. The manual checks that happen right now as well actually have been shown in some reviews to be quite unreliable. So I've looked at a couple of review studies where they've seen what real border agents have done, and actually they're about 20% more likely to match a pair of faces as a positive rather than say that they're a mismatch. And when you give them a balanced set of faces, so an equal number where it's the same individual, an equal number where it's not, their error rates can be up to 35%, which is quite staggering, really, that 35 out of 100 people could be let through. So to achieve a much better result and also do that remotely and much faster, we use facial comparison AI models, and these have been trained on millions and millions of faces. They can achieve superhuman accuracy, so much more like less than one error in 1,000 rather than 35 in 100. And they're also provably unbiased. So we've taken our models and tested them on balanced sets of people from all different backgrounds, and we can show that there isn't any bias there at all. The final example I was going to introduce is name matching, and this is another thing that's sort of appears very simple on the surface, but really isn't. The classic example, I think, is the Tim versus Tom versus Thomas one. So obviously, Tim and Tom are only one letter difference, but any person, or at least any person from a sort of Western background, can immediately say that Tom and Thomas are a much closer match than Tim and Tom. And that's the sort of thing that's really difficult to build into a traditional automated system. There are just so many different sort of exceptions, spelling variations across the world, that it's just not practical to cover all of them. So what ends up happening is most of the automated systems there are today, they only approve sort of almost certain matches. So that would be quite long names where there's just one or two characters different. You can't do that in short names like Tim and Tom, because of that example. And that basically ends up meaning that there's a lot of false negative matches. So cases where the system can't reliably say that they are the same name. And all of those just get sent for manual review by humans. They often actually then have to spend quite a lot of time thinking about it, and deciding whether it's a true or a false match. It might be a name from a country that they're not at all familiar with. They might have to sort of do some research into nicknames, spelling variations, and things like that. An extra complexity to this is when you try and automate it. As I mentioned earlier, you're usually pulling the name directly from the ID document, using optical character recognition. And that's never really going to be a perfect process. If you've got a sort of slightly dodgy photocopy or something, there's often extra errors introduced there. So what we've actually got at the moment is a beta system where we're using large language models, to help us in doing this name matching. And they're actually really, really good at identifying any sort of spelling or OCR errors, because of their huge background knowledge of text, that they understand how those sorts of things happen. And as well, because of the background knowledge, they've got a really good idea of different names from different cultures. They can easily understand most nicknames and spelling variations without any problems at all. And this system that we're really excited about, hopefully, will be rolling out soon. We've seen that it can deliver results which are quite similar to what an experienced and well-researched human can do in a fraction of a second. It gives almost instant results. All right.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Saul. So I think, Afan, if you want to say a little bit about Idenfo's philosophy on AI, that would be great. And then we can transition over.
Sure. Thank you, Mariam, and thanks all for a very nice presentation. While it was not really part of the script, I came up with certain questions while reading your things, and when we will be, like going along the way, like we can discuss some points, right? So I was also thinking that LLM also can be used to, uh, let's say, create or correct the spellings, like coming out of OCR. So sometimes OCR it spits out when we think about OCR, I'm not only thinking about identity cards. Imagine all sorts of documents, handwritten documents. So can LLM be used to regenerate those spellings or other things? But like we can discuss it later.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's going to be very interesting. But Idenfo's philosophy, Idenfo's AI philosophy. But before that, we also need to understand Idenfo's philosophy. So I can think about three major pillars. Idenfo is force for good. Uh, the second one is technology innovation, and third one is future leaders. So the first and three, I'll briefly, just skim through it, and then I'll focus on the second one. The force for good, global estimates say that there are 1 to 3% fraud detection in the financial transactions, and it's usually happening because of like creative ways of conducting frauds and lack of reporting or some regulatory blind spots. I mean, these are the three things that usually contribute to this 98% of so of frauds and only 1 or 2% detected. Idenfo is very much committed to improving this rate. So that's how we become a force for good. The third one is future leaders. Idenfo believes in, like preparing future leaders who can further lead, because that's only how you can scale with the right ethos. The second one, technology innovation, is something that is more, intertwined with this idea of AI and what is our philosophy. Now, it's again based on, three major things I think about, and when we talk about philosophy, it is going to be a bit of philosophical, but then I'll try to synthesize it later. But like you can think about in the sense of we believe in the evolution of uh, of a species of different sorts, and like humans, like cats, or like reptiles, or the way we think about it, and it's not what I think about it. Like there are multiple philosophies, like the idea of cyborgs. Donna Haraway talks about cyborgs, and it's the natural extension of human beings. Technology can be treated as one of them now, and then like it's very famously um, uh, uh, said by a few technologists, and even reinforced by some people, that like we can treat AI or machines as another species. So, and like when we think about the Idenfo's philosophy, it's about like the coexistence of AI and humans. So we are not really trying to say that we are replacing anything, and we will discuss it later how one is complementing other. But the idea is the coexistence of AI, and we build hybrid models of different sorts, which can help. The third point is very much related to this, and I would like Mariam to further elaborate on that because it's related to customer experience. What the other thing we want is to humanize digitalization, which is very much powered by AI in our case. For example, Saul, you were showing this identity card, OCR card-based capture, so that we can, like using our phone, we can scan a card and it will populate my details. Uh, Alternatively, I could have just, entered the fields in my digital form, but it would be very inconvenient for me. It's very much convenient for me to basically, scan the card. But let's think about one thing. Why is it convenient? Because, like it's a human experience. When I go to a branch at Barclays, or maybe go to the airport, they ask me for a card. It's being digitalized, but let's think about how it has been happening. It asks for a card and the person sees it. It doesn't ask me to fill a form after that. I mean, like adding my details. So that's why it's a good experience. And what digital usually does is it tries to uh, digitalize human experience. Even AI is trying to contribute to that as much as we can. Uh, for example, like how they're bringing nuances, the tone nuances in GPT LLM outputs, for example, and trying to like mimic how humans speak, how trying to mimic the interfaces, the human interfaces as in a digital world. So in that sense, I believe that the third major philosophical pillar of Idenfos is to humanize digitalization and bring really good human experiences. And Miriam, I think you should be adding to it because it falls under your domain. So I would like you to talk about it. But these are the three things I believe really contribute and power the philosophy of Idenfo.
Yeah, for sure, Afan. Really well said, and I think that the marriage between, and in fact, it's not even just the product of good use of AI is a marriage between man and machine. It's also like that's the source, and I think that particularly lay people to ML and AI, which I fully am. I think we can forget how much creativity all of these new developments are resting on. Robots are, programmed to do this thing or that, and models can learn things, but there's no comparison between that and the sort of creativity and potentiality that would create that to begin with. Um, and that you can only get from, a set of human beings in conversation like this, lost in thought, under an apple tree, and so on. And that's where you come up with the sort of unthinkable things that now we're talking about in this webinar. I think for sure AI would have a lot of what Saul has shown and the things we're speaking about would have been unthinkable some time ago. And so I think what's offered by each of those things in that marriage, each of the partners in that marriage, they're not really the same. And so, like one of the common ones is the idea of AI replacing human beings. And again, there it's not replacing human work, but how can we, for instance, reduce the need for human minds to do boring, tedious, repetitive work that long, long ago, for instance, the sort of work that we erased the need for in the Industrial Revolution. Factories before the work that is done in factories was being done by humans before. And that's, we can forget that those sorts of changes have happened again and again and will continue to happen. Although I completely understand and share some of the panic around these changes because of how unprecedented they feel. And they are unprecedented, but human beings came up with that. And then on that, yeah, I again on the man-machine binary, I totally agree with the point on our ethos and that like as we turn the dial up on digitization and the not invasiveness makes it sound bad, but the prevalence of tech in more spaces of our lives, that we have to be more careful than ever to maintain degrees of humanity and warmth within that, because automation does make things faster and smoother, but it can create remoteness and detachment as well. And so, yeah, I think it's always important for businesses that have, these large sort of tech functions to avoid becoming cold in any way. Whether through copy, through good UX, through fun sliders, through good, strong journeys, simple journeys that seem like they were thought up by a person. Because as you said, AI can mimic humanity really, really well. It can mimic, our accountants. It can mimic even a strong researcher. But it isn't a person in any sense. And the idea that it can think and feel like one, I think, is one of the misconceptions that people have, which was my attempt at a gentle segue into the next portion of this conversation, which is yeah, to go through some of what
I think,
people get wrong
Miriam,
about.
can I ask a question if allowed?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
no, I was just saying that, look, in this where we can automate and have AI as a productivity tool, which makes a lot of sense because over a period of time they learn faster than humans. They can repeat transactions without mistakes. But how the human traits, two human traits, which are so critical for any business. One is empathy, and one is your own ethos, values, consciousness. Is there any one of you can help me understand how you see these interact with AI and the humans? Because these are very human specific till today. Tomorrow it may change, but how do you see that happening?
Yeah, maybe I can pitch in on this. I think it's a really good point, and it's one of the things that we need to be really careful about. There are a lot of things that AI can do better than people, the research side, all the things you mentioned. But the ethical side of things is what we need to keep human. I think where some companies go wrong is blindly trying to automate away everything, and that's when you end up with something that's quite cold, as Mariam was saying. We need to be careful about where we use AI, which parts of it we automate away. Nobody wants their whole job 24 hours well, not 20, however many hours a day, to be just filling out forms and reading text off documents. But there are a lot of things that we do want to do, and it's a great part of life, putting your ethos into a business and making it work. Those are the things that we need to keep human.
I can also add to that, and so the way I think about it, that like any model, any AI model is as good as the data it is trained on, or the experience that is fed in it. Uh, so when we think about, like let's try to explore these terms, empathy and culture and values, right? So, I mean, when I think about empathy, like how humans learn empathy, let's think about it. Like sometimes, and the same goes for culture and values. I mean, they're inculcated in people, like when kids are, like growing, their parents, the society they live in, they teach them how to empathize with other human beings. That's how it learns it, right? Otherwise, it would not have learned it if a kid hasn't, like interacted with the society. Now, in a typical, if I try to, like project this entire thing on the modeling stage, it's like uh, feeding data, like into a model and saying that for certain scenarios, you need to act in a certain way. And that's an experience that it's embedding into a model to me. I can give you an example. There's this company called Hippocratic AI. They make multi-agent based models, and every model basically corresponds to a department. For example, there is a model for compliance that is basically checking HIPAA compliance. There's a model for doctor that's prescribing medicine, so on and so forth. And then there is one model that is the relationship model. And that relationship model actually initiates a conversation. It talks to you in a very friendly manner to empathize with the person, to calm them down, so on and so forth. The way it works is that, like it's trained in a certain way and it's told that to behave in a, in a particular way. I think when I think about these terms, empathy, culture, and values, I think uh, they're also, like product of how of social interactions and how, like your the people before you taught you certain things, and they taught you, and by teaching means that they basically transferred their information or knowledge from one generation to another in that sense. So I think about it in that sense more, that like it's again like a transition of data.
No, I
And
think
if yeah.
that's really helpful, Afan and Sol. And that's my point, that technology companies, and specifically Idenfo, it's in the stage where this is a time when we start thinking of empathy, of ethical values, the cultural differences, of country nuances, and baked it into the DNA of our technology as we grow. So that's very, very important. And as you said, that once the models develop to maturity, it is very hard to change the ethos then. And I'm really happy to see that it is on Idenfo's mind, as you all said, that we while we are deeply and firmly a technology company, we are very keen to see how humans and technology will work together in the future.
Yeah, exactly. It really is working out how to work together. You mentioned again the cultural differences. I think that's a particularly interesting point because it's something that we tend to view as quite a human thing, those cultural differences and having the empathy to understand different cultures. But when you take an objective look at it, humans are often worse than the automated systems. We have all these unconscious biases and so on. So it's a very complicated situation. And we need to think very deeply about where the right places to use AI and automation are, and where to keep it human.
Thank you, Saul.
Definitely. Sana, I saw your hand was up. Do you want to ask a question now, or should we do it later on, whichever you prefer?
Yeah, I'll wait. It's okay. I'll wait, or I'll put it on
Okay,
mute.
don't
Thank
forget
you.
it though. Text
Yeah.
it to me. All right.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, over to you guys. We were speaking about misconceptions, I think.
Yeah, I think let's just start that I think there's one conception or misconception that we keep thinking about is that is AI conscious or is AI self-aware? Can it reason? So, Saul, I mean, I have a position there, but I would like you to, like start and then we see where it goes. But yeah, what do you think? Is AI conscious as you are?
Sure, I think I think I have a sense that maybe you'll take the more philosophical angle. So perhaps I'll speak just sort of practically about what's going on today. Um, you know, to be clear, what the AI models that we have today are not conscious. They're not self-aware in any way. They've been very carefully crafted to sort of appear that they are. When you have a conversation with a chatbot, that is the end result of many millions of sort of hours all put together, of the model being shown by a company, what it thinks the right way to interact is, how to appear conscious and so on. At the end of the day, it's all about that data that goes in, at least in the sort of current training paradigm of supervised learning. The models can only do what they've been shown, and they are at the end of the day sort of regurgitating that, although it has been slightly modified. Where things start to get a little bit more interesting is sort of looking to the future. When you look at more of the sort of reinforcement learning side of things, and this is something that is the sort of focus of more and more research these days. That's where instead of just showing a model data and letting it learn from that, you sort of give it a playground to explore itself, let it sort of generate things, and then evaluate its output and see how it is. You can they do this now with the chatbots, where they have a set of humans who ask questions and then they take the responses and score them, both on accuracy and things like friendliness and sort of the appearance of consciousness. That's how they bake in that behavior. And it can get really interesting because so long as you can define what's called a cost function, basically a way of scoring the output, on a sliding scale from worst to best, the models in theory can learn anything, and without any input data. If you can give them that playground and score the output, that they can learn through trial and error in a way that's much more like a human. And I think in looking to the future, that's sort of where the potential for the models to gain some kind of a consciousness or even become self-aware, that's where that can come from.
Yeah, thanks for that, Saul. And I was not actually in this case, I was not going to take a philosophical position because, like again, if we try to define consciousness, I mean, I know like it's a very, very, like very convoluted, very ambiguous term to be very honest, and it has been like this in the history of philosophy as well. What is, like consciousness? But because I'm not really intelligent, I'll try to, like break it down into very oversimplified things. I think it's more when I think about consciousness, it's more like to think, and to think is to create. Like when you can think about new things and to create or generate new things. Uh, Now, if I talk in terms of models, they can, like generate things, to generate objects, generate images, which probably did not exist. And how did they do that? By doing pattern matching. Like they were, like matching different patterns. They were, like trying to learn from their inherited knowledge that came to them through data, as you were saying, right? So they are creating, like if I and in my own sense, the consciousness or like is more about like creation, like and it's even in the human experience when we talk about writing poetry, it's a very conscious thing, and the poetry, the term itself is me, it comes from poiesis, and which means to create. Like in you see the term autopoiesis, right, to create itself. So I mean, it's more like consciousness is more like creation or generation for me, which is very much um, uh, like AI activity. Now, like very interestingly, like I personally think that, and it may be a slightly controversial opinion, but we have, like I feel this idea of understanding human consciousness is an overrated idea in philosophy as well. And the reason for that is because like a lot of existential philosophers, for example, and the people like Mariam and Sana who have studied philosophy or can further elaborate on that. But the idea is that they came up with very complicated definition of this human consciousness. Uh, and at the same and we like to a great extent have been glorifying or like aggrandizing and like almost like divinizing this idea of human consciousness and or like treating human as something like superhuman, that there is this thing consciousness, this is soul, this is a spirit, and like all of these things are something that you cannot understand because you do not have the capability to understand. But right now, talking practically, I mean, to be conscious of something is to create, to reason is also to create, to come up with the reason. And I think the models are doing a pretty good job. Let's talk about, I'll just give one example and then I'll hand it over to you for the second misconception. But you guys know about this idea of Kikul structure of carbon, sorry, of benzene, the six figure. So it's a chemical composition. It's a six, like a molecular structure of six carbons in one benzene. So the story goes like that Kukul was thinking about this this entire structure is inspired by a dream that came to Kikul, in which he saw a snake biting its own tail, the Ouroboros or whatever it is called. Right? This is a term. So that's how he basically, like by matching a pattern or by learning from a completely different use case in a completely different discipline, it actually, like try to create that. And I think the AI also works in that sense too. Like it can learn from a different experience that probably has no relation or resemblance with a new experience, but it can project certain ideas on the new experience. And this is, and to me, that's conscious. Like if Google is, like called, like it's given a lot of credit for its own creativity, but like I think the same creativity can be given to a model too. So that's to me. That's why I think Mariam, to me, it's not really a myth or sorry, a misconception or not. I mean, it's a question of how we are really, like um, asking, how are we really defining consciousness or reasoning or whatever. So yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a sort of open question. I think that the misconceptions maybe come more from the understanding of where we currently are in our understanding of what that question means and then what the models right now can actually do. It's certainly a sliding scale, and we're not at zero in terms of conscious AI, and we're not at 100% either. We're somewhere in between.
Yeah, and also think about, like the spectrum of human consciousness. It's not just one. I mean, like, like some
Yeah,
people are very
absolutely.
intelligent and conscious, some people are not as intelligent as others, right? So, like AI falls in that spectrum somewhere, right?
Yeah, and you can draw the parallel all the way back to plants even. I think a tree is quite a good example of a classical rule-based system. The roots of the tree will go towards water and they'll go away from light, and the
Mhm.
branches will basically do the opposite, they'll go towards light. Those are very simple rules, and then you apply them at scale, you end up with a tree. And AI is sort of scaling up that on the computer side. And then when you look at sort of cellular life, multicellular life, and then eventually humans, that's scaling up on the biological side.
Absolutely. Yeah. Um, so,
Wonderful.
yeah, sorry, Maria.
No, I was just
Lee,
thinking through
what's your
the
take on this conscious? I really want to know this because you're usually, like against the dehumanizing, and I was actually trying to oversimplify and completely
no,
discount the
no,
idea of human conscious. What
I
do you
don't.
think?
I don't, first of all, I'm just a layperson on AI, but no, I think like the famously hard problem of consciousness is is well, there's actually a guy called Alex O'Connor who has a YouTube that's popular here in the UK, and he had this whole segment on trying to prove that there is a degree of consciousness just within that ChatGPT voice function. And he found through things like, getting it to lie to him, getting it to, try and be careful with his feelings and so on. He found that there was a degree of a degree of reasoning beyond regurgitation, but I think that's, very much within the realm of what Saul said, that it sees, like, it learns really, really well, and people lie, and people show evidence of their thinking and their creativity, and evidence of everything really in what they do and what they say and how they behave. What the real essence of consciousness is, I actually haven't studied philosophy, so I wouldn't say I'm equipped to answer, but I think it's like many things, like you'll know it when you see it. And I don't know if I've necessarily seen it so far in AI. But like Saul said really well earlier, there are certain things AI is worse at than we are, and there's certain things it's loads better at. So the idea, for instance, one of the misconceptions that came up. So for the viewers, we sent a survey out to ask people a few questions about, their takes on AI and their worries about it, what excites them about it, to try and populate what we're talking about in this conversation. And one of the things that came up was about the idea of surpassing human beings. So, and I think in some senses, AI does surpass human intelligence completely. Like Saul was saying, there's certain tasks it does better and quicker than we can. And I think all of this also invites questions of like how we define knowledge, and not only how we define knowledge, but whether certain paths to knowledge are more appreciable to us. Like coming up with um, coming up with something, is it the same as knowing it, and how we value those things slightly differently. But yeah, another one of the ones that came up a lot, and I think that's again like the jobs thing, something that is very much present in how people are speaking about it on both sides of the political spectrum, is about the dangers of AI. So that can be whether we've already discussed the jobs thing, the environmental dangers, or even like political dangers of who it benefits and who has access to it and things like that. Do you guys have anything to say on the ideas of AI as dangerous in any of those ways?
Sure. Yeah, I could just speak a little bit about what you mentioned about who AI benefits. I think there's definitely a kind of view that AI is somehow owned by the big corporations, Meta, XAI, all of these ones. And we don't necessarily want to be just funneling more of our money into their pockets. But it's sort of, I think, underappreciated in the public sphere, probably, to be honest, because it doesn't make very good headlines and so on, that the sort of open source community really isn't very far behind. There's a huge push with developers to sort of replicate things, make it open source, make it public, and actually, a sort of single person like any one of us, given, some time to research it, a sort of decent coding ability, can actually set up an AI model that runs on their own laptop, as long as it's not a really, really cheap one. And that AI model, if they made it today, would actually be better than the state of the art model at the start of last year. So, things are moving at a pace, but they are sort of gradually becoming more open, I think. It's not quite like the early days where OpenAI is dominant. There's a lot of truly open stuff that anybody can do. So, I think it's in some ways sort of everyone's responsibility, our responsibility to capitalize on that and not let the big corporations sort of get a stranglehold on it. We need lots of smaller startups to do their own thing, and use AI in their own ways.
Yeah, I think I agree with Saul. Uh, as long as you're democratizing the use of AI, and as people are actually keeping it open source as much as they can, especially the models, things are fine. But then, even in that sense, I mean, like, would we say that AI is dangerous, or is the use of AI that's dangerous? I mean, that's another distinction that we need to make. And again, like if you think about, and when you think about the danger, I think the question is also related to the previous question. Some people think that it will become something, like monstrous, or, like it will eat you out or something like that. No, I don't think it's going to be like that. I mean, to me, it's just like how in industrialization, people reacted to the use of machines. It's just the evolution of human race. I mean, that's how we will be. I think it's a really interesting part. It's not really dangerous, and I think Mariam, you were making this point that AI will be handling these tedious jobs, so that and it will give a lot of time for us to think creatively, like about many other things because there will be multiple agents working for you. So I think, and talking about this, there's another misconception that came to my mind is that will AI replace human jobs? And that's very much linked to this idea because it's another danger, right? That's the biggest danger that we think about. And I was talking about this company, and I keep following that Hippocratic AI because they make these virtual agents at a scale. And similarly at Idenfo, what we have been trying to do now is to build agents that can basically, do alert remediation for us, which means that, it's also a tedious job, by the way, to, go to each alert, find out whether it's a positive, false positive or not. Imagine that you have thousands of hits against your name, Mariam, in multiple sanction list, but it's not actually you, right? And then there's a person in a bank who has to go and try to remediate that. And yes, you can tune it to some extent, but you will still end up getting fewer. Now, it's a tedious job. Can an AI agent, based on the human experience of remediating and discounting those alerts, learn and become better, as good as? Yes, this is something that we've been trying to work on, and I think there's a really good opportunity there. Now, similarly, Hippocratic AI is trying to make these doctors and virtual doctors, and but their business model is very interesting because it's not really replacing human doctors. It's actually asking doctors, the certified doctors, to create their clones. So in other words, they're assistants who can go and talk to different people. So they will all teach them, they will help them learn. So they have Hippocratic AI has built this interesting interface. And I'll add this link to the chat if you guys really want to think about virtual agents and read about it in action. You should go and check this particular platform out. Now, what they have said is that when you will create your agents, we will actually give you commission because you will be in charge and you will be as your agent is as good as the knowledge you are transferring to it. So it's actually again the coexistence of two. So I don't personally don't think that it's going to replace human jobs. Yes, it's going to change the mode of job or the way we are working, and that's exactly what happened in industrialization, right? I mean, like it's not something very new to us. So that's what do you guys think?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, it's definitely scary. No one wants to think that their job is going to be replaced, but it's important to realize if you look around today, probably most of the jobs that people are doing, or a lot of them just didn't exist 100 years ago, because of industrialization and things. So it's, as you said, it's not something new. It's not something that we need to be really fearful of. It's just we need to bear in mind these changes and sort of handle it in a responsible way.
Definitely. And just to transition before we get to the question section, into something a little bit more positive, because there are certainly many dangerous uses of AI. Like there are many dangerous uses of, a stick. I wanted to also ask you both, as, tech insiders, what are some things that are exciting you or that you're like, that are on the horizon that are interesting or, yeah, that you're looking forward to? Whoever can go first, of course.
I mean, I can go first, and there's one thing that excites me and also frustrates me at the same time about AI is that it's not funny at all. Like sometimes one thing I try to do on ChatGPT is to ask it to create jokes about different situations. It's really, I mean, like really bad at making jokes. Like, and I keep thinking about it's because of the data or anything. I mean, it's something that like it can definitely not replace human comedians, I believe. Uh, I mean, on a lighter note, I mean, this is something we need to really think about. How can we make it funny? It's really terrible. Like, I'll just read one thing to you, and you guys will understand. So, I just asked it to create a joke about itself, and said, "I once thought starting multiple businesses at the same time was a genius idea. Now I just tell people I collect stress as a hobby." That's one of the most terrible jokes I have heard. And I was like, okay, you will need another a 200 or 2000 years to get better at that. So that's one thing. But exciting, these all the things that we have discussed, it's very exciting. Let me talk to you about this idea of agentizing compliance operations, because like talking professionally, it's a really good thing. And we did some calculation, and we were both in terms of cost efficiency as well as operational efficiency, we were achieving about 96%. I'm talking particularly about the use case where a human agent can be replaced by an AI agent to discount these alerts and just to go and identify whether this is a real alert or not. Is it a false positive or not? It's very exciting because now I can, if I can, do implement such a model that can do this tedious job, those humans can actually focus on something more creative than going and discounting those alerts. So that's exciting. Other than that, this entire field of AI, or machines, it's even before this AI, like machines, if you talk about, it's about bringing efficiency to me, and it excites me. At times it oversimplifies things. You end up losing those human experiences and nuances. But what we need to think, instead of consider it a threat, we need to think how to bring it into the AI or technology. For example, if you talk to a virtual agent today, you can really quickly identify that it's not really a human by the way it's talking. But if you go to, I'm again going to quote Hippocratic AI, talk to their agents, they basically, from their tone and how they are managing those nuances, cultural nuances, the way we are talking, it actually talks like, it tries to talk like that, and we need to focus on that bit. So I think there's a the thing that excites me is that it's actually getting better and better at making humans. And now once it completely mimics me, I can focus on something more creative and think about something else to do. So that's exciting for me.
Yeah, I think maybe I'll just speak a little bit about the comedy side of things as well, because I think it's kind of a good example for what I'm excited about is why that's such a challenge is, first of all, it's difficult to define what makes a funny joke, right? So you think, oh, okay, we'll take a huge data set of funny jokes and feed it into the AI, and see what it comes up with. But that sort of misses the point that a key part of a joke being funny is that it's got to be somewhat original. You can't have heard it 100 times before. And it doesn't work if you just sort of take the start of one joke and stick the end of another one onto it. You need something that's quite novel. So the majority of the training that gets done these days is that supervised learning, just sort of teaching it from examples. But what I'm excited about is getting more of the reinforcement learning, which is, as I mentioned before, this completely different method where the AI is free to experiment and then you just score its outputs. If I was tasked with making a funny AI, that's what I'd do. I'd give it a background of all of the jokes that we know are funny, and then let it just come up with loads, and then get a panel of people to rate them, and then
If it's
over
not
time.
getting if it's not getting enough laughter, then that's not a
Well,
good job.
exactly. Your cost function there is the decibel meter of how much people are laughing, right? So long as you've got that, and it might not necessarily be ethical, but if you got 1,000 people and lock them in a room with the AI for a long time, eventually, in theory, the AI would become funny, right? So yeah, that's really what I'm excited about is this reinforcement learning, giving the models the sort of space to be creative. That's where it's got the potential to come up with things that are novel. Whether that's sort of new reasoning steps that might be useful to science and so on, or something just as simple as being funny, right? The challenge there really is defining those cost functions. The decibel meter, it's simple in a small example like that, but when you're trying to come up with a model that's general purpose, it's really difficult. And maybe I'll just mention a sort of classic example, which is the coffee making robot. This is one that's been around for a long time. That if you created a robot and its whole task was just to make you the best cup of coffee it can, you ask it to do that, and it's probably quite likely to just sort of steamroll over anybody that's stood in front of the coffee machine. It will just kill them and get them out of the way because that's going to slow it down. So you've got to be really careful to build in, okay, don't kill anybody on the way and don't sort of burn anything, and all of these other factors. It's really difficult.
That's so funny. Both the murderous coffee machine and also the like 100 people locked in a room with like this kind of AI with like, tell me
Yeah,
another joke. Was this one funny? That's
that's
so
an ethical problem for the future.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Um, but yeah, there's yeah, so much good stuff in there. And we'll just like transition, and I'm sure we'll get to talk more about all of these things in answering some of the questions. But people in the chat, this is the moment if you'd like to ask questions, and we can start with Sana, who's been waiting for ages,
Thanks.
isn't it? Yeah,
No,
over
no,
to
this
you.
this this was an amazing conversation. Like I so enjoyed it. It was incredible. So thank you so much to the speakers. Just like, I don't know if these are exactly questions, but I don't want to be the kind of person who pretends to have a question. It's actually a comment. But it just made me think when you were saying so first on the humor thing from a fan's point, there's an element of spontaneity and wit that is important for humor, and maybe that's why AI is not able to do it because it is relying on, an already existing whatever context and data that it's been fed. And also, uh, going back to a point earlier about consciousness and what's the difference between a human being and so on, is that as far as I know, and again, you guys are the experts, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of large language models rely on tokenization, and ChatGPT, for example, does tokenization with words instead of characters. And it's a very famous problem that if you ask it, how many R's are there in the word strawberry? It says two instead of three, which probably a human being wouldn't do, so that's kind of maybe one way in which you can say that it is different from consciousness. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Yeah, there's definitely a difference. And I think, the solution to that problem is making an AI that understands when not to just proceed in its normal way of looking at the tokens. It's absolutely trivial to write a couple lines of Python code to count the number of R's. And the AI needs to understand that it should do that and then execute the code rather than use its sort of built-in text generation. Yeah.
That's interesting. I didn't know that that's how it would work. Hamad, did you have a question? Hamad in Karachi?
Yeah, yeah. So thank you so much, guys, for the opportunity to learn more about, AI. So I have one question. So as deep fake and fake identity fraud techniques, keep evolving, right? So how can, AI-driven solutions stay ahead? Are there, any real-time AI strategies being used to fight these threats?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a few things that we do. So, a key protection really is the screen detection. Because we're in the products that we deploy, generally it's a sort of secure SDK. So it's not possible to just sort of inject in the video directly. The attack vector, if you like, for a deep fake is a screen replay, where someone's presenting a video. So if we can kind of stop it at the source, and stop them showing a screen. That's the best thing to do. Further to that, there are also sort of slightly more advanced analysis models that just try to detect the deep fakes, full stop, looking for any small inconsistencies. I'm sure we've probably all seen one or two deep fake videos at this point. And it's difficult, but if you look very closely, you can tell. You can see strange little things around the edges of the face, the hair, maybe the way that the eyes move. There's just that kind of slightly spooky feeling that you get somehow. It's hard for a human to say for certain, but this is one of the sort of examples where with enough data, an AI classification model can be quite certain and make a decision there.
I think additionally, I think adding to what Saul said, multi-factor authentication is another thing to think about, and it has nothing to do with AI per se. However, it can act as one of the identifiers, right? For example, if there's a deep fake, if someone is trying to, like attempt a spoof the system by a deep fake, I mean, there should be, like other government identifiers they need to be checked against. So that's another way to think about, and that's why like we always, even in the AI world, and that's something I keep seeing, that people are trying to solve every problem through AI and models. It's a tool. It's built for a particular purpose, and yes, it may have new features later, but we also shouldn't be, abandoning our own critical thinking and problem solving skills. If something can be solved with an OTP, so we don't really need to employ very high cost models for that job.
Yeah, 100%. And Ahmad, e-passport verification, right? If we have the ability to get the NFC tag from a passport and validate that digital signature, we've got a really strong second factor of authentication there, which just kind of completely bypasses the whole question of whether it's a fake document. So yeah, completely agree that AI does not solve every problem, and sometimes there's a much simpler way to do it.
Amazing. Kamal, I see your hand up. And before you ask the question, I just want to shout out to everyone on the Zoom. Guys, Kamal made the really beautiful visuals that have accompanied this whole conversation. So, yeah, just so you know. Okay, Kamal, say your question
Yeah,
whenever
so
you're.
so my question was regarding what Afan said earlier, regarding that once AI, sort of the Hippocratic AI thing that you were talking about, where it becomes sort of assistance, less of a replacement. I kind of just feel like it's like my question was like if AI does replace a lot of jobs, I feel like once your job becomes redundant, you sort of get removed from society, and it kind of becomes difficult to live because realistically, most people, they kind of live paycheck to paycheck. So, what are the jobs that you guys think if somebody is in right now, they should try to maybe transition to something else just because there's a higher risk of it being completely replaced? Because I feel like there are jobs that would get completely replaced, right? So, what do you think those like jobs
I
would?
think, yeah, so you're right. There will be certain jobs that might be replaced at a scale. And, like how in the banking industry, when branchless banking came in, like a lot of people shut down their brick and mortar buildings, right?
Right.
So you can imagine a lot of security guards of those branches lost their jobs in that sense. However, Kumail, I think while it's also, replacing certain jobs, it's also creating new jobs. And in the case of Hippocratic AI, those doctors, it's in no way, like trying to completely replace doctors. But in that case, they created a new job where they would be able to train new assistants. And if you go to that website, which I shared, you will find that there is also a very lucrative commission model for that. So based on their knowledge base, they are going to train, like new agents, which will be acting on their behalf. Yes, it's always happens, and it has been happening in the history of human, like society, that there will be times that like new jobs will be created, and the structural, like paradigms will be shifted. And I think this is the time when it's happening. What people need to do to answer your question, we need to get into is to have basic understanding of their time, right? And to understand this time, you really need to have basic understanding of how AI is working. So get familiar with these technologies, AI technologies, and also try to, like contribute to that, not necessarily in a very technical fashion, but to the overall AI ethics, AI transparency, so on and so forth. Because without AI transparency, ethics, and other things, like it can't be, like implemented on a mass scale at all, right? So, let's talk about banks, right? There will be a lot of regulatory requirements. There already are. That's why banks are not actively using AI in transactional systems. There will be such jobs, but yes, there will be a paradigm shift, I believe.
Right.
Actually, I another question that we were asked, Afan, sort of you sort of touched on it when you said that not everything that can be done with AI necessarily should be done with AI, and I think like with the ease of access to things like Perplexity, ChatGPT, and others, I don't know if you guys have seen this in your lines of work. I've seen just in like regular life, um, a real what I would call like an overuse or a misuse of it, where some people like I understand, for instance, making like a training plan from it or things like that, but I increasingly I think it's being used as Google. So I've seen people my loved ones put in like how many ml is this many ounces. That's a super easy Google has that programming built into it. Or is this good for my skin? asking medical questions on ChatGPT or on Perplexity. So in terms of not only the potential for misinformation there, but also in terms of the negative impacts to critical thinking, how can we sort of be careful about the sort of intellectual laziness that this might allow for? The lack of just thinking for 10 minutes about, doing the math or doing a Google or finding a separate site. Like, what do you guys feel about that?
Yeah, I think I would like to sort of bring it back again to this sort of idea of two-factor authentication in a way. I think we need to think about not specifically just about AI, but about somehow authenticating information, however we find it online. We all know lots about fake news and sort of interference and so on and so forth. We actually have a lot of really good tools for authenticating things, digital signatures and so on. I think people should think about, instead of just Googling something, can we set up some sort of a system where you find the information, but you actually check that it's been, say, signed by a medical professional, something like that. We have lots of tools available and we're just not using them sort of widely enough. I think AI has kind of accelerated the amount of information that's available and also the amount of information we can ingest. It's brought these questions to the surface, but they're probably things that we should have been thinking about before anyway.
Sorry, Afan, did you have something to add, or should I? Thank you, Saul. Do you have something to add, or should I get to the next question? We just have one or two left, I think.
No, I actually wanted to add, but then I lost my stream of thought for some reason, so I can add it later. I'll
No,
call
perfect.
someone.
Okay. And what this is a question that came up a few times again in the survey that we sent out, and it's something that I think again has been a widespread idea only in like the last 6 months, in my view. And it's the question of the environmental impact. It's something that I think is spoken about with a fair degree of like at a sort of catastrophic level, where I've heard it spoken about. And then equally, there seems to be other sides where it's like that is a huge misunderstanding, and or the environmental impacts aren't being seen in relation to the other sort of tech that we're comfortable using every day. So could you guys shed a bit of light on what people are talking about with those fears and whether they're unfounded or fair?
I think I'll try to add to that. So when we think about environmental impact, there is one way to interpret this question is to think about it from the ESG perspective. The society, like the ethics and the societal governance perspective as well. And the other way to think about it is, like in a very try to understand what environmental impact is. And let's talk about it from the like climatic perspective. And the same problem happened even in the case of blockchain. A lot of people are complaining from the ESG perspective that it takes a lot of energy for you to train models, and that energy obviously translates into significant environmental impact in terms of like emissions of different sorts, so on and so forth. The same problem, like you can imagine in the blockchain, where people would say that to do one Ethereum transaction, it would equate to like cutting down one tree, something along those lines. That was the kind of carbon footprint it had. And in that sense, yes, there is a huge impact. However, there are certain innovations going on to make training less costly. I think I was having this conversation with Saul. I think last year he was talking about how to, like train, models on smaller devices to avoid that kind of impact. So I think if we like stick to the climatic impact, which is obviously a very, very prevalent question in this time, because of like the net zero commitment, so on and so forth. I think that's there. The second thing is that even today, no one is really I was just talking about AI transparency and AI ethics, and it's very much also related to this idea of ESG. And there is now regulatory requirements for ESG. Banks have to comply to certain requirements. Everyone has to report to their report their emissions, and if they're doing any paper-based work, they need to transfer to paperless work as much as they can. Now, how to, bring it in the AI world? Like, I think all of these companies that are training AI models need to, comply with those regulations and need to report how much they're doing and what they're getting in result of it. So I think I'd like to answer it in that way. So it's all over to you. I think you were the best person to take this one.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of really good points there. I think, you know, it is important and it is real the environmental impact, but at the same time, we need to put it in context. Doing one sort of AI answer might equal a couple of hundred Google searches. But to answer that question properly, you may have had to do 10 different Google searches, click on X number of links, spend maybe even more time with your screen turned on to do the work than if you just did it in one AI prompt. So it's very complicated, and it's not really fair to use those kind of headline grabbing comparisons, I think. But it's undeniable that there is a big environmental cost to training the models. But yeah, I think it's something where there's no easy solution. We basically do just have to look to the future, that things are becoming more and more efficient. Techniques are getting better and better. At the moment, a lot of the efforts is just scaling up. The efficiency is going towards making larger models and so on. So the environmental impact isn't really going down. But at a certain point, we'll hit the level where we can achieve the results that we want, and then the benefits will start to scale down the environmental impact. So it's not sort of all doom and gloom. Yeah, I think that there is sort of hope.
Amazing. That's in fact a really nice note to end on. And I think we're just about reaching the end of our time. And yeah, I just want to say thank you to Saul and Afan for preparing all of this material and sharing your insight. Thank you to Sana and Komel who helped us prepare all of this, and thank you to our to the loyal few who are still on the call. And obviously to everyone who attended earlier in case we release this material in marketing. And yeah, I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you for giving all of this time to us. And yeah, maybe we'll see you again at some point.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thank you for
everyone.
hosting, Mariam.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a good day.